Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to TFI, where today we're going to be doing a Vault question. This is sort of an Ask TFI section, which I've only done one of before. But I've been wanting to do something on Vault. I've been wanting to do a piece on Vault for a while, but A, it's not very exciting, and B, this is an Inventor channel, so I've been a bit hesitant, but there's been a few Vault questions come in the past, so I thought, it's about time I did something on Vault. And contrary to the fact that I do an Inventor YouTube channel, my main area of expertise is in fact Vault. So I'm perfectly qualified to do this, or so I say. Right, so just before I get started, the camera might go completely overexposed and blown out at random intervals and then look like I'm sat in the cupboard in others. And that's because I'm not in a photo studio. I'm using the UK natural light behind the camera to light me, and that's most unreliable. It's sort of half overcast, half blue sky at the moment, so occasionally it's going to be a bright sunny day and then it looks like it's going to lash it down, so who knows how that's going to go. We don't care though, we don't care, we're just going to crack on. So questions come in, which I think is going to be relevant to a lot of people, hence why I'm doing a video specifically on this. And I've asked the guy if it's alright to answer his question, he hasn't responded, so I'm going to do it anyway, but not name names. So the question is specifically relating to Vault, and if you're not sure what Vault is, then you're not in for a very exciting video. It's a data management program that works alongside Inventor. You check your files in, check your files out, that kind of thing, but does more than that. That's what I'm going to answer in this video. So I've been given your name as a good contact for Vault. At the moment, I've got an iPad and everything. Look at this, man. Next level. At the moment, we are moving from 2014 Inventor to 2017. The 2014 version never really took off here due to setup and caliber of staff. What do you mean? Caliber of staff and support, if you know what I mean. Yeah, I do, mate, yeah. Seems we need to get Vault installed on a separate server. Have you ever got involved with the justification of Vault Basic and Pro and Workflow versions? Which would you recommend? Is it upgradable? Hearing comments that we would need to get a Vault admin person. I don't want to have to be a slave to the system to make it work, if you know what I mean. Need it as user-friendly tool that will help us. Needed as a user-friendly tool that will help us. Also, could you advise on the spec of a machine to act as a server? We will have potentially 4 users using Vault. 2 are fairly proficient with Inventor. Right, so the question is, right, they used Inventor 2014 and and it never really took off. I'm not sure how that goes about happening, because you need, it's what I mean by that is it's an expensive investment when you put in something like Inventor and it becomes the CAD tool in an office. I'm not sure how it can occur whereby you just don't use it. What else is in there? If you've got another package in there like AutoCAD, then that needs to be removed and people just need to be trained up and then just brute force savagely made to use the new thing. But that's not the point here. So they're going to move to Inventor 2017 and give it another crack. So, it seems that we need to get Vault installed as separate. So the question is why, they're thinking they need to use Vault. And the question is why, which version of Vault should we use, and essentially what benefits is it going to give us, and is it going to be a ball ache? So, Vault it's a data management program, and it can come in 3 different flavors at the moment. If you've ever searched historically on YouTube, on Google, or on the Autodesk website for Vault, you'll find multiple different variants. Autodesk have been really bad with tracking Vault throughout the years. Originally it was Vault in Product Stream, then it was Vault, and then it was Vault Professional, and then it was Vault for Manufacturing, then you've got Vault for Collaboration, then you've got Vault Workgroups, now you've got Vault Basic, and it's been renamed and repackaged throughout the years to multiple different things. And they've not done themselves any favour when it comes to historical searching for information. So, right now, as of today, you've got 3 flavours of Vault. You've got Vault Basic, which is the one that comes out the box with Inventor, and they say it's free, but it's not really, because you've got to have bought already a CAD license to use it. So, it kind of comes bundled in with that CAD license. So you could argue that it's part of the cost of the CAD license. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Then Vault Workgroup, and then there's Vault Professional. So there's 3 flavors. So he's saying which version, when it comes to justifying which one you'd go for, what would you go for? Well, it's never as simple as that, right? Vault Basic gives you basic check-in and check-out functionality, right? Vault comes with a server component and then a client component. The server component requires an SQL, Microsoft SQL Server instance to be installed. That can be Express if you're working in a very small office, Or if you're working in a larger engineering office with lots of users, lots of traffic, then you'd go for the full SQL standard license. But then that's expensive. So you run it on SQL Express. It goes on a server. With Vault Basic, that server can be a desktop PC. So that can happen. I personally I couldn't work in an office where the Vault server is a desktop. It would just be too unreliable. Given that I work with Vault all day, every day, I put Vault onto enterprise servers for huge corporate clients that are global. To think that I'd be working in an office where that Vault server is just on a desktop under a desk it makes me cringe a little bit. But it can happen. That can be a thing. So Vault Basic, you've got your server component, and that's where the files are checked into. It's difficult to explain this without really boring you to death, but the files are checked into the Vault server and they're stored on this PC under a desk with Vault Basic. And then as a client, you have Inventor, then you have the Vault client installed on your PC, and then you log into the Vault server through the client. And with Vault Basic, you don't get any high level functionality. You don't get revision control, you don't get life cycles, you don't get any high level automation, if you know what I mean. You get check in, check out, version control, copy design, very little else really. But your files are now in a Vault server, and the crucial thing is they're version controlled, meaning that when you check something out, it goes up, check it in, it goes up a version, and you can trace the history of a file as it changes throughout its life. But actually, before I go into the downsides of Vault, I'll explain what the other versions are. Then you've got Vault Workgroup. Vault for Workgroups gives you file level, document level revision control, meaning that you can check your files into a Vault, and then you can give them a revision letter. You can give them a life cycle definition. Are these files work in progress? Are they in a checking state? Are they released? And then that locks the files and prevents anybody from opening files in the future that are released, because why would you want to do that? And it gives you that level of control. You've got a whole bunch of other stuff, but in a nutshell, workgroups, this isn't a sales pitch for the workgroups, so I'm not going to sell it. But that's what workgroups is really all about. It gives you file level, document level, workflow control. And then Vault Professional, which is the highest, all singing, all dancing, or so they claim, most expensive license of Vault. That gives you everything that Basic has and Workgroups has, but on top of that, Professional gives you items and change orders. Change orders being... Actually, change orders might be in Workgroups. I'm not too sure. I've only ever used Professional, so I'm not sure if ECO's change orders come in at Workgroups level, but it's not important. But the main thing that you get with Professional over anything else is items, which they're like ERP. They're like ERP objects in a way. So you've got your files. You're checking a file. It's a little widget. You've got the modeling data for this little widget, and then with Vault Professional, you've got this item record, which is stored in an item master, and that item record tells anybody what the part number is, what the description is, any additional properties, the information you might want to know about it, notes, the bill of materials, the history of it. It's all stored on this item record, and the file's just attached to the item record. So you don't revise the part, you don't revise anything to do with the file. No workflow information goes against the file, it all goes against the item. You release the item, it locks the file. So it's a different kind of way of working with Vault Professional. So what I'd say is, whichever version you go for really depends on, first of all, how much investment you want to put into it, because in my experience, you can't just install Vault Professional and then just use it out the box. There's always going to be a point in your workflow where you think, right, we're all good so far, now we need it to do this, and then you'll find that it can't do that. So you then have to speak to a developer to try and write a program which interacts with Vault and sort of severs off something Vault does out the box, and then you want it to do something that you want it to do instead. And that becomes expensive, it becomes time consuming, and then you do become a slave to the system. You do then become completely enthralled in trying to get Vault to work the way that you want it to work, rather than the way Autodesk thinks you should work. So in my experience, it's not really possible to put in Vault Professional without having a dedicated admin guy, which is one of the things that's been mentioned here. Because with workflows, whether it's with items or whether it's with the workgroup level file management, the file level revision control, it's really unintuitive within Vault. I can, in future videos, if anyone's interested, I can show you how it works. I can show you what the problems are with it. But in this video, I'm just going to tell you what. I'm just going to sort of briefly glaze over it. But when you put files onto revision control, Vault unfortunately isn't very intuitive and it's not very intelligent. You can't just point it towards a drawing and say release that drawing. You just can't do that. That drawing needs to be given a revision letter, and that's completely separate to the I property in the drawing. The drawing in Vault needs to be given a life cycle definition. It needs to be put on a definition which has a number of states. It then needs to be given a proper state which will be released, but you can't release the drawing until everything that the drawing uses, all the parts and assemblies and children of assemblies, until they're all given a revision letter, and that revision letter matches the I property. Because if the revision letter doesn't match the I property, then there's a mismatch there. You've got the I property saying I am revision B, and then you've got the file in Vault going, well, according to this thing over here, I'm only revision A, and then you've got a mismatch, and then Vault will just not release your drawing if it detects that. So you've got to put it on the life cycle. You've got to make sure the revision letters match. You've got to make sure that, and for large models, that's a massive administrative task, because some of your drawings will call up models which you haven't opened up in years, and some of them will have revision letters in the I property, some of them won't. Vault needs everything to be absolutely perfect before it'll even think about releasing something, and that takes a long time to get right. And it takes a long time for newbies to understand what is even going on, because, and rightly so, they expect Vault to just be able to release something and that's it. Just point it and release. Then when it comes to up issuing something with Vault Professional, Vault Workgroups, you should just be able to select a drawing and say, I want to up issue it. Well, you can, but then you've got to think about the children of the drawings. Do you want it to release do you want it to up issue the drawing and the assembly? Just the drawing, the assembly and all the parts, the assembly and just a handful of parts, and the feedback that Vault gives you to interact with the children of that drawing that you're up issuing is really poor. Like, wow, it's really bad. So when you first implement a Vault Professional system, which I'm actually going through as we speak, I'm now at this very moment in time introducing a company to the Vault Professional workflows. It's so unintuitive. It is so difficult for new people to understand how this works that, yes, unfortunately, I don't know what Autodesk would say. I've never really had the conversation with anyone from Autodesk and said, you know, if someone is implementing Vault for the first time, do you think they need regardless of what they think, you do. You do, unfortunately, need somebody dedicated to not only fix errors, understand everything that should happen, but also enforce it. Because if you don't enforce it, users will just completely ignore everything you've done. You can put the best all singing or dancing revision workflow control into Vault. Everything gets released all in one go, everything's locked, everything, PDFs get created and drawings get published and exported and all this sort of stuff. But if one user just looks at that and goes, I ain't got a clue what I'm meant to do here, they can just finish their drawing in Inventor, check it in, print it off, and then bypass the system and not do it. So somebody needs to be charged with the job internally of enforcing these kind of things, and if that person's not there, then the system will struggle to work. Unfortunately, that's my experience of it. So what would you recommend? Is it upgradable? Yes, it is. So if you do go with Vault Basic in the first instance, Vault Basic means that your Vault is just a storage bin. There's no revision level stuff in there. There's no workflows. It's just a storage bin, but a managed storage bin. Then in the future, if you want to upgrade to workgroups, you can do. You buy the workgroup licenses. You have to migrate the server component to workgroup level, and then migrate all your clients to workgroup level. And then there is an upgrade path, and then the same goes from workgroup to professional, or from basic to professional. But you can't go back. If you do decide, well, we're going to go with Vault Professional on day one, and you figure that this isn't right for us, it's too much hassle, you can't downgrade from professional down to basic or workgroup. So it's up to you. There's plenty of companies out there, though, who do buy Vault Professional and then take years to get it working, to get it to the point where they're actually using the professional stuff. So they'll use it as Vault Basic, but they're paying for it, if you know what I mean. So there's plenty of companies that do that. So they need to be a user-friendly tool that will help us. Yeah, it unfortunately is, again, Vault does have its benefits in that you get the version control, you get the revision control, you get copy design, which is really useful, but in my experience, which is vast, I'm hugely experienced with Vault, to the point where it's all I do every day for the last 12 years. Vault, in my experience, consumes more time for most people than it actually saves in time. You do get a lot of tangible benefits from using it, but it's not a time saver, it's not a productivity booster. The propaganda that you'll read on Vault about how, boosting productivity and, saving time and all that, it's all nonsense. It's all sales propaganda. It doesn't, over the long term, Vault has so many issues, it's so many bugs, so many problems, so many convoluted workflows and failed interactions with CAD clients, that over the long term, in the long game, you lose out when you're working with Vault. So it's definitely not a time saver, but you have to weigh up whether the loss in productivity is worth the benefits that you get in other areas, like version control. So if somebody does make a complete balls up of a model or a drawing, you can roll that model or drawing back to an old version. If you get some disgruntled member of staff who completely hacks up the drawing and decides to, draw a big penis in the drawing sheet or whatever else, then that what they've done is documented in the Vault, and you'll be able to see who's done it, their name's stamped against any changes. So you get traceability for stuff that's happened. And there's a whole bunch. Again, this isn't a sales pitch for Vault, so I'm not going to go through all the benefits of using it, but there are benefits to using it. So can you advise on a spec of a machine to act as a server? Right, well, that entirely depends. I did reply to the guy that sent this question in. I was like, look, there's a whole bunch of depends and ifs and buts into this answer, and there is. So the type of server that you use for Vault depends on what environment you're in. In his environment, he's got 4 users, so you don't need a big server. But you don't need a server. You could put the Vault server on a PC. So again, it depends. Do you have budget to buy in a server? I would never, as much as it will work, I would never ever recommend, even if you're in a 2-user office, never put your Vault server on a desktop PC in the office. Because somebody will pull the plug, somebody will turn it off, somebody will, Windows updates will reboot it, and then you'll come in the morning and it'll not work, it'll have not backed up or something like that. It's too unreliable having it on a PC. So buy a server. The server does, for a 4-user office, the server really doesn't have to be big and powerful. It could be a VM server, it could be virtualized, it could have 2 cores, it could have 8 gig of RAM for a 4-user office, and it can have a minimal amount of hard disk space. It needs to be just bare bones. But then when you scale up, like I'm managing 2 offices at the moment. One of them is a site with over 100 Vault licenses in there, and their server is this 32 gig of RAM server. It's Windows Server 2008, soon to be 2012 R2, and their servers are absolute powerhouse. The other company is a 5-site replicated global manufacturing company with offices in the UK. A Vault which is replicated. And that's another thing you get with Vault Professional. You get server replication, so you can work on a Vault in one country, and that Vault is then replicated out to another country, and you are all working on the same data set. Don't get me started on that though. There is a whole bunch of issues surrounding that as well. It works, but there's a whole bunch of issues and things to talk about. But their servers, because it's replication, you've got to use the SQL Server agent to replicate data tables between sites, and those servers have to be a little bit more powerful. But there's no such thing as you don't buy a Vault server. You just buy a Windows server, a Dell rack server, or a VM host with enough power to just make sure it works. So there's no right or wrong. But depending on which version of Vault you go for, you need to make sure you get the right SQL version. So you would have to go to the Autodesk website to check the server recommendations, or that's the minimum system requirements for running Vault server. So that'll be the minimum Windows operating system, the minimum SQL version that you need to go for, minimum SQL service pack level that you need to go for. Don't really pay any attention to the minimum RAM requirements and hard disk space. Autodesk cannot tell you, even though they do, they cannot tell you how much hard disk space you need to run a Vault server. Because you might have a 4-user office and your entire catalog of data might be, 30 gig in size. Whereas the companies that I'm working for right now, theirs are nearly a terabyte in size. They've got a terabyte worth of Vault data. So Autodesk say, the minimum system requirements is 500 gigabytes of disk space. Well, you might only have 30 or 40 gigabytes worth of data, so you just don't. So anyway, it doesn't. Don't pay any attention to that. But for disk space, you need to make sure you've got enough disk space there to hold the data that you're going to be housing in Vault. And then you need to factor in future expansion, so the data will grow. And data grows in the Vault faster than it would do outside of Vault, because when you put a file, a drawing into Vault, Just making sure I'm still recording. Yes, I am. When you put a file into Vault, that file goes into the file store of Vault, this encrypted area behind the Vault server, which it stores all the files. But then when you check that file out and check it back in, it goes up to version 2. So you've now got 2 files in the file store representing one drawing, version 1 and version 2. And some drawings go up to version 200, 300. So you've got 300 physical IDWs or DWGs in a file store, which represents one file. So your file store and the amount of data that the Vault server holds does grow much faster than it would do outside of the Vault. And you also need to factor in backups. So the Vault backup it's a console-based internal backup system where you can run it through a script or you can run it through the console, and it creates a backup package of your Vault, your databases and your file store, and it just copies the entire Vault structure to a folder. Just big folder dump. And then you would normally back up locally to that server and then make sure you extract that backup package off the server somewhere else. So you need to be able to house that backup as and when it's done. So disk space is completely dependent, but at the moment, I mean, I would normally say just stick in 2 terabytes. It's a server, for Christ's sake. You know, my phones at the moment, phones are coming with 200 gigabytes, 300 gigabytes of storage space on. To say that 2 terabytes of space on a server is asking a bit much, is a bit ridiculous. So yeah, I would say about 2 terabytes of space, 16 to 32 gig of RAM. Again, you might not use that much RAM, but my laptop's got 32 gig of RAM. To say 32 gig of RAM is asking a bit much for a server, it's perspective. So that's what I would say to this guy and anyone else who's thinking about using Vault. That was the message I wanted to put out. It's not a time saver. There is a lot to think about. Vault will not just work to the way you want to work. You have to flex and bend to suit how Vault expects you to work. For example, the ECO system, which is the engineering change order system, that's the change management part of Vault Professional and possibly Vault Workgroup. That's a fixed workflow. For example, you have to make what's called routing lists to work with the ECO system, and those routing lists are very, very inflexible. ECOs it's like Autodesk just give you these things and they say, right, there they are, use them if you want to use them, but you're kind of stuck with it. You're stuck with it. If it doesn't work how you want it to work or how you've worked previously, then you're shit out of luck, son. And email notification within ECOs is really poor. Autodesk, half a job Autodesk decided, wouldn't it be great if when an ECO is raised in the engineering team, that sends an email out to other people in the engineering department or external to the engineering department, and then tells them that there's a change going on. Yes, that's a great idea, let's implement it. So what they did is whenever an ECO goes from one state to another, so an ECO goes from work to in approval, it pings out an email to somebody on the routing list. And that email contains no usable information whatsoever. It is a spam plain text bit of email which has got ECO number 1234 has changed from this state to that state. Have a great day. That's pretty much all it says. And that person who receives the email has then got to log into Vault to check what that ECO is. And nobody wants to do that. Also, that person who's on the routing list will be getting pinged emails for ECOs which they've got nothing to do with, they're not interested in. Most people who need an email from an ECO are only interested in hearing about it when the ECO's finished, because that's the point where they need to do something. But you can't set that up, unfortunately, in Vault. You just can't do that. Autodesk think, no, these people need to be sent an email for every ECO that's raised, that they're on the list for at every stage of the routing list. And it's like, and the email's got no information in it whatsoever. So that's another example of where most companies would have to then interject and write their own app to completely disable the Vault standard routing emails and write their own that contains useful information. So it's one of those things where you can't just buy Vault and then use it. You need to come up with a plan to write your own apps if your business practices don't suit the way Vault expects you to work. So I'll leave it there. I've been rambling on now for 25 minutes. That's probably long enough. I've got a lot. I work with Vault day in and day out. I've got a lot to say about Vault, about every single aspect of Vault. I work with it at a very high level. So this is my bread and butter. This is what I do day in and day out. So I haven't covered it much on the channel, mainly because it's not a very exciting subject, and I've experimented in the past with 3 Vault videos. The only ones that really took off were the installation guides. The other 2 were like tips and tricks on Vault. There's probably fewer people that watched those videos than have watched this video already, so it just didn't take off. But that was when the channel wasn't very popular. Now that it is a bit more popular, if anybody is interested in Vault stuff, I've got an endless, bottomless pit of information to distribute on Vault, and information guides and things to look out for, which I could do, but I just don't know if anyone's going to be interested in hearing it, because Vault's one of those things that you don't really search YouTube for. It's not one of those things that you go, I know I've got to spare 10 minutes. I'm not going to go and watch the new video from the Kings of Leon. I'm going to go and watch Vault videos. You just don't do it. And Vault's it's one of those things where with Inventor, people enjoy learning Inventor because it's a fun package. It's 3D modeling. You can make some cool shit in there. And also, learning Inventor can help your career. It can help you get a better job. It can help you get a job. Vault, on the other hand, is one of those things that some guy like me walks in, puts it in, and then tells you you've got to use it. And you've got more work to do than you would have otherwise had to do. So it's kind of a menace for most people. That's what they see Vault as being, but I don't know. Let me know in the comments below if you want any more information videos on Vault, specifically relating to what. Try and keep it generic. You know, I get a lot of questions which are specific to one company. I can't answer those, obviously. It needs to be generic and applicable to a lot of people. But either way, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video. Doodles.